And our next guest shares something in common with me. We are both refugees or escapees from the world of corporate insurance. For those of you who don't know, I used to work at AIG, Liberty Mutual, some other insurance companies. And Wendell Potter is a former executive with Cigna, if I recall correctly. And he left that world right around the time the debate began about what became the Affordable Care Act, and wrote about that and spoke about that publicly in a number of places. He's gone on to become a journalist, an author, and an advocate for better policy, and he joins us now. Wendell, thanks for coming on the program.
Richard, glad to be here. Thanks very much.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We haven't had you on for a while, and I wanted to ask you first. We'll talk a little bit about the Republican health bill, but I wanted to ask you what you're up to now in terms of, I think you've got a new venture, right?
I do, and actually I'm returning to journalism. As you stated, I had a long career in insurance and health insurance, and I worked actually for Humana and Cigna over about 2 decades. My first career, though, I was a journalist, and I was a reporter in my home state of Tennessee and Memphis and Nashville and then Washington. I've returned to that because I've seen journalism change, and not necessarily for the better, over those several years. And what we're going to be doing is creating a new nonprofit journalism platform called Tarbell, tarbell.org. It's named after an investigative journalist, Ida Tarbell, from the early 20th century, whose work was incredibly important. Among other things, it led to the breakup of Standard Oil Company, which was John D. Rockefeller's trust and or conglomerate, and it led to a lot of antitrust and campaign finance reform during that era. What we're going to be doing is connecting the dots for people to help people understand the connection between all the money that's spent to influence elections and public policy, to connect the dots to help people understand how that affects their daily lives. And it does, in just almost every area you can think of, certainly healthcare. And as you noted, I left my job at Cigna just a few months before the debate began on what became of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And I saw, as that bill was being developed, how it was being shaped in important ways by the insurance industry, the drug companies, and others. It does a lot of good, and I certainly am concerned about what's happening on Capitol Hill right now. But big special interests influence everything, and they essentially call the shots in many ways here in Washington and the state capitals.
Yeah, I love the idea of connecting. People don't get the full picture of how policy affects their pocketbooks on a daily basis.
Yeah.
They get I think my theory is, I'm curious your thoughts about this, but my theory is that's one of the reasons why it's become so easy for people to demonize taxes in any form, because people see taxes, they see it taken out of every paycheck. That's a concrete connection between policy and our daily lives, but people don't see the hundreds of ways that other decisions take money out of our pockets, including our paychecks on a daily basis, whether it's your health insurance premium or something else you've got to pay every month, the size of your rent, your car insurance, whatever it might be. There are a million dimensions to policy. So how do you see that working? How do you see connecting the dots play out in terms of a concrete, something people can read or see or listen to?
Well, let's just take healthcare for an example. We pay far more for pharmaceutical drugs in this country than anybody else in the world. We pay actually twice as much as the average of other developed countries in the world. The reason for that is because the drug industry really owns the capital, really owns lawmakers. They are able to influence elections through campaign donations or the threat of not giving a campaign donation to a candidate. And they spend enormous sums of money lobbying. In 2009 and 2010, the pharmaceutical industry alone spent $275 million lobbying to influence the Affordable Care Act. The insurance industry spent millions as well. So people don't really understand that. And what we're going to try to do is provide the context to help people understand why things are as they are, why we have to pay so much for drugs, why premiums continue to go up, why healthcare in general is so expensive. And for another example, why do our young people leave school these days with such high student debt? It's just incredible how much they're burdened down when they leave college in many cases.
You know, that's a great example. And again, we're talking with Wendell Potter, journalist, and his new venture is tarbell.org. You know, student debt is a great example because when you and I went to college, put it this way. I remember when I passed the New York State Regents examination, got a Regents scholarship to the State University of New York. My family celebrated because that was going to save us $250 a semester in tuition.
Yeah.
The New York State University of New York is considerably, my mother remembers when she went to the University of California she used to remember when she went to the University of California and her total cost was a $25 a year registration fee. Now, obviously, it was more in today's money, but it's not, we're not talking about the kinds of astronomical sums that even public education costs people. And again, as you say, that didn't just magically happen.
No.
That was the result of conscious policy choices.
Oh, absolutely. It's exponentially more expensive to go to college now than it was when you and I were in school. I went to the University of Tennessee, and my situation was somewhat comparable. I got a scholarship which enabled or helped pay for my college education. My parents had saved a lot of money to help, but I left without any student debt. And it was fairly uncommon student debt back then, at least anywhere close to what it is now. And it's one of the reasons why, just to show exactly what the consequences of that are. In dentistry, for example, I've talked to dental students, and I've seen the data. It's of students who leave dental school, the average is about $300,000 that they're carrying in debt. If you're carrying that much in debt, you're not going to go serve an underserved community. You're not going to go to the middle of Kansas or some poorer neighborhood in a big city. You're going to set up your practice in a prosperous suburb or part of an urban area.
Right,
and
absolutely.
and the same is true in medicine. It's one of the reasons why we have a problem with not enough primary care physicians.
And it's one of the reasons why we don't have enough teachers sometimes.
Absolutely
to fill
right.
Teacher slots. So yes, so good. I love this idea. I think it's a great venture. And by the way, I'm sure you saw there was a new report this week showing that that Wall Street and related financial industries spent an estimated $2 billion during the 2016 election cycle for a combination of lobbying and campaign contributions. They're not doing that because they like to throw money away.
No, and one of the things we're going to be trying to do is to help people understand why they do that. What's in it for them? Why do they spend so much money to do that? And of course, the short answer is they're doing it to preserve a very profitable status quo for them, or to enhance it. It's all about the money at the end of the day. It's a good investment. It pays off. That may sound like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. But when you look at what the return on that investment is, it's enormous, and we pay for it in one way or another.
Oh, we paid for it to the tune of about $66 trillion in lost future economic growth after the crash of 2008, which itself was caused in large part by the deregulation decisions that were made in the 1990s. So I couldn't agree more. So what does this... Now, I was sure... That's me, and I was sure I had turned it off, which I did. See, this is my complaint about iPhone. And Apple technology is even when you put the silent buzzer on, it doesn't buzz. But okay, so what is this going to look like, and when can we expect to see it?
It's going to be online exclusively, and you'll be able. In fact, you can go to tarbell.org right now to see a landing page, and we'll give you more information about what it is and what we plan to do. We plan to launch with journalism in the middle of the year. July the 1st is the date we're targeting. In May, we're going to be launching a crowdfunding campaign. It's going to be unique in several ways, not only with our approach, we'll be focusing some on, obviously on money and politics, but not so much the politicians who are on the receiving end as the check writers and what's in it for them, as I said before. But we want this to be reader funded. We're raising money now from foundations and individuals to get us to the point of being able to launch our crowdfunding campaign. We're getting ready for it. We're getting ready for our journalism, but we want to be reader funded. We want to have the journalism that we produce actually paid for by subscribers. In one sense, it's old-fashioned, and in another, it's a brand new idea. We've been looking at some very successful launches in Europe, for example, and one of the founders of one of those journalism platforms in Germany is on our board of advisors.
Oh, great.
It can work.
No, it absolutely can work. And again, we're talking with Wendell Potter, and since you came out of journalism, and we've seen journalism change a lot over the years. We've seen it change just in the last several years, and obviously everybody's looking nowadays in the era of social media and the internet. Everybody's looking for two things. One is a self-sustaining journalism model, and the other is for journalism sources you could trust.
Exactly.
And so I think the idea is a great one, and I'm looking forward to it. But before I let you go, I do want to talk to you a little bit about our old industry that we shared in common, because we saw it was an interesting timing. I'll just pick one aspect of the Republican healthcare. Well, they call it a plan. I'm not sure it coheres the way a plan should, but the Republican healthcare proposal that came out this week. It was interesting timing because Donald Trump met with a group of insurance company executives last week.
Right.
Then this bill was rolled out, which, in my estimation, had more to do with wealth transfer than it did about the provision of health care, much more. And one of the provisions in this bill, just to show how transparent sometimes these things can be, and it hasn't gotten enough coverage as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that the Affordable Care Act's limit on the tax deductibility of executive pay, which was pretty generous, it was limited at $500,000 a year, is lifted by this bill. And the only argument I've heard the Republicans make in defense of this is we don't discriminate. But of course, health care is paid with public dollars, so there's a legitimate reason.
Absolutely.
So, what do you think of this process? Is there any merit I'm missing to the Republican? It's actually a couple bills, but to the Republican health care bill?
No, I see no merit in it, and I've looked at it, and I see that it is not improving on the Affordable Care Act. It takes us back. It will be devastating for a lot of people. You're mentioning his meeting with those insurance company executives. I saw a photograph of that, and it was him in the middle in the Oval Office, surrounded by a whole bunch of middle-aged white men, with one exception. And you can rest assured that every one of those guys makes multi-million-dollar paychecks every year. They're rewarded very handsomely. One of the jobs I used to have when I was at Cigna was to answer questions about the CEO's compensation. So I know how they're paid and how well they're paid. But the bill itself will enrich those companies. It will enrich banks. One of the things they want to try to do is encourage more people to enroll in health savings account. Now, what it really is encouraging more wealthy people to enroll in health savings accounts because they are increasing the amount of money you can contribute in a single year. The average, the median household income in this country is still just $55,000. If that's your median household income, you're not going to have a whole lot of money to set aside in a health savings account. But if you make $300,000 or $400,000 a year, or if you're part of the 1%, or at least the top 10%, you might. But the vast majority of people that's not even meaningful.
No, and the rest of us, in effect, are paying for that.
We are.
Because there will be a reduction in services and or other financial pressures that come out of losing that money. No, I couldn't agree with you more. It's exactly like Trump's child care proposal, which is also a tax deductibility. They're calling it the nanny deduction, because wealthy households will get a lot of benefit from it, but everybody else is just... A lot of people are just scraping to get by.
Oh, it's true, and those high deductible those health savings accounts have to be connected to a high deductible plan. So it's going to encourage more and more of insurance companies to push more and more of us into these high deductible plans. That makes people more vulnerable to have to pay more money out of their own pockets. And I know that's one of the reasons I left my job, was because I was expected to be a champion for these kinds of plans. And I knew back then, this was in 2008. that these were not good for low and middle income people. They just simply are a way for insurance companies and employers to transfer more of the cost of care onto the backs of people who really don't have the financial wherewithal to pay for the health care like they're expected to these days.
I couldn't agree with you more. And one of my big frustrations during the election was, first of all, as you know, I felt that the Affordable Care Act was a first step, but needed to be taken much further.
Right.
And one of my big frustrations in the last election was that we talked about the cost of providing coverage. We didn't talk about the cost for people of needing care, which can still bankrupt and does bankrupt many people. So we're up against that, which to me proves, among other things, that we need this kind of journalism more than ever right now. So where can people go to find out more about this?
Go to tarbill.org. You can find out information, quite a bit of information there. And we're getting a lot of press, at least in the journalism media. And I was just interviewed by Columbia Journalism Review. But for most folks, you can go to tarbill.org and you can sign up. In fact, I encourage you to go there and sign up. When you sign up, we'll keep you posted, and we'll let you know when we're ready to launch the crowdfunding campaign and starting with our journalism.
Okay, sounds great. Wendell Potter, journalist, former healthcare executive, advocate for constructive change. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you, Richard.